So this gave the perfect mashup vibe. If you took Alice in Wonderland, The Wizard of Oz, and Labyrinth, and you put them all together, that would be Caraval. Hi everybody, my name's Rebecca and welcome back to My Bookish Travels. Today I'm going to be doing a review discussion of Caraval by Stephanie Garber. If you guys haven't read this, I highly recommend it. It's the first in a trilogy. It is a completed series, so you don't have to wait for any books to come out. The story follows our main character Scarlett, who for 7 years has written to Legend, who runs Caraval, and has been begging him to come and bring Caraval back to her part of the world. And she wants to attend the event. And it's very hard to get tickets to Caraval. And lo and behold, her final letter that she writes to Legend, he sends back 2 tickets, actually 3 tickets, one for Scarlett, one for her sister Donatella, and one for Scarlett's fiance to come to Caraval and to experience it all. I'm not going to say much more aside from the fact that when you're reading this book, you need to remember that it's all a game. I loved this story. It was a 5-star read for me. I loved the design of the book. I loved the format for the writing and how the letters looked like letters in the book. And I loved the artwork for the map. My emotions were all over the place in this story. It was so good. I was rooting for certain things at one point, and then at other points, I was so upset and angry and emotional. And this book, it just brought out all the feels for me. So if you guys are looking for a book like that, I highly recommend check this out. You might just be surprised. For those of you that haven't read the book, I'm going to delve into more of a spoiler discussion. So I don't want to spoil those that haven't read it, but that short, condensed, spoiler-free review is perfect for those that want to go into it not knowing a lot, but also are getting hooked and gripped into the story. So this spoiler section is going to be broken up into a few different parts. The first one is going to be the characters. I'm also going to discuss some specific scenes in the book. And finally, I am going to discuss some of my favorite scenes as well as some unanswered questions that occur in the story. So the main characters in the story and some side characters that I kind of want to discuss. So we have Scarlett, who did at a couple points in time feel very annoying to me as a character, but overall her point of view was one that I really liked getting to be involved in and see the story through. And I feel like I understood Scarlett. By the time I got to the end of it, she had grown and was just this really interesting character that felt very humanized in the fact that at times she couldn't make decisions. Also, her sister Donatella is one that I was so frustrated with at the start of the novel. I was so mad at her sister at the start, and I was somewhat mad at her sister at the end. But overall, I really enjoyed Donatella as being kind of the antagonist of the story in a way because of the unknown things that she was involved in creating in this story. The entire way through the story, I totally thought that Julian was Legend the entire way. I'm like, he has to be Legend just with how he's acting and how everyone's treating him. And then he's not. But he ends up being Legend's brother, which also means that he is like her grandparents' age. So that never gets discussed, the fact that he is probably much older than our main character, which is a little bit weird, but it worked in the story. Governor Dragna was a character that I absolutely detested from start to finish of the story, could not stand him as a character, and honestly confused why he was not a choice for killing off. But again, it's a trilogy, so he probably needs to make an appearance in book 2 or 3. Next is the mysterious fiance. Why were we keeping him mysterious? I'm very confused on the thought process. Was it more so because of the fact that he already was kind of that 180 from what he was producing as this perfect persona to Scarlett? He was vastly different to that, or did he just kind of like delve into that? I'm not sure, but all I know is the mysterious fiance ended up being pretty much the same as her father, which was very scary. And finally, Legend, the character that doesn't actually make an appearance until the epilogue, and the character that has me the most intrigued. And I think the reason why Legend is one that has me so intrigued is because of his connection to Scarlett and Tella's family line. That background with their grandmother and Legend were just totally did not see that coming and was really happy that Julian was not Legend at that point in time because it would be a little bit strange for him to be in love with the grandmother and then the granddaughter. Mind you, for some reason, I'm feeling like Legend and Tella might become a thing. I was so shocked with regards to the mentality of the father kind of disciplining the one that hadn't disobeyed to punish the other sister. I didn't understand it at the start. I was so mad with Tella when she was like, tell him that it was her you were kissing. And Julian listened and then watches as the father beats Tella. And honestly, so done at that point in time. I was like, okay, am I hating the wrong person? Like, what the heck is going on? So my emotions definitely were doing a lot of a roller coaster ride when it came to Tella's character. But in general, I'm figuring that the issue was that Tella is just a character that I didn't know a lot about and does a lot to make it seem like the surface shallow level that she's at is who she really is. And I feel like there's a lot more to her character that just is not being, it's layers, onion layers from Shrek. You're just not pulling back those layers and getting all of them for Tella, but I bet you're probably going to see that in book 2. I was flabbergasted at the end when Tella jumps off of the building and was not expecting that at all. I was shocked because of the fact that I, as well, reader, player, watcher, whatever, totally got immersed in the story and stopped thinking that it was all a game. So I was flabbergasted in that moment because I did not expect that to take place and was really surprised by it and also really excited by it as well because really and truly that was brilliant because I did not, at that point in time, I no longer was thinking we were still in the midst of the game and I forgot that it was all just a game. Can we all just talk about when Julian gives her a day of his life? We don't even have to go into detail with that. We're just going to let that sit there. Julian gave her a day of his life. Also, may have given a day of the life where they both are going to be dead, but they were both hugging, laying in that bed. That happened. I truly feel that Julian had to have feelings for Scarlett from the beginning, just with all of his interactions with her and all of the things and reasons why he never left like he was supposed to. Also, he did portray himself as being her fiance the entire time, so I feel like there were some underlying feelings and emotions in his life during that actual story itself. The dress that Legend gave Scarlett that changes with her emotions, I really would love to see that come to life on screen. But I also wonder if Legend did that for a reason, because it would make a very easy way to figure out if there was something that he needed to maybe get involved with in the story, because again, Legend is hoping to become the hero in this game rather than being the villain. So in the back of my mind, I'm wondering if he did it as clues for himself to figure out, okay, do I need to help her? Do we need to call this off? Is this for Tella to be able to read Scarlett's emotions and be able to make a decision if necessary to get her out of there? There's not a lot of information given on that reasoning, but it did leave me wondering if there may have been more to this beautifully imaginative dress that changes with her emotions into being some sort of sign for Legend, Tella, or someone else. Also, can we just talk about the fact that Julian was adorable calling her Crimson, and as annoying as it would have been if I was the main character, I, at the end, was so upset when he stopped calling her Crimson because they weren't in the game anymore. No, dude, you've already cemented that nickname. You have to fully commit to it, and now you can only call her Crimson in my way of looking at it. Dante was a character that I'm still a little bit confused by. So yes, he's all kind of about himself, but the way that he was acting around her, I know at one point he was in the game because he was supposed to be the interest, but there was just something about his interactions with her that left me wondering some things. I can't say what things, but they just left me, like, I feel like there were questions that I had in moments, and then they just disappeared. The same as the magic of Caraval disappears after it's gone in a way. It leaves that feeling with Dante's interactions with her. Also, we never do get clarification about his sister. Was that a ploy in the game that she was missing? We don't really get an answer on that. Nigel the fortune teller is probably the weirdest, brilliantest, hilarious, and uncomfortable scene in the entire story. And honestly, it was genius writing, and that is all I can say about it, because if you read it, you probably have the same emotions, being like, this is weird, but brilliant and stunning and well written, and it makes so much sense, but it seems so confusing at the start. That is basically what my rationale and my thinking was while I was reading that book. Also, we have Julian being taken out of the game. That was so traumatic reading it. And then to find out that it was still, again, in the midst of the game. But in that moment, very traumatic. And I'm just like, why are all the characters dying? I was already kind of triggered because of Tella. And then that happens to Julian. And then her dad and the mysterious fiance. And I'm like, oh, what on earth? There was just so much going on in that moment that it just felt very overwhelming. And at that point in time, I was done being like, it's a game. I was like, no, this is legitimately happening in my life right now. And on top of that, then you find out Tella was writing the letters to Legend the same as Scarlet. But what's interesting about him responding to Tella is that Tella's letters were actually written more directed to him and wanting to have a conversation with him, rather than how Scarlet was writing kind of about herself and her sister and why she wanted him to kind of bend to her way of thinking. And I just really found that intriguing and quite a shocker. And obviously the epilogue leaves you wondering a lot of stuff. First off, it's the only scene in the entire book that Legend actually makes an appearance, but it also leaves you wondering if book 2 is going to contain things about Legend and Tella, and if that's going to happen. It would also seem strange, but again, I've read a lot of books that do this, where they have like 2 sisters and they end up with 2 brothers. Are they going to go that route? I don't know. They could, but I also feel like Legend is much, much older than Julian, and I just don't know what's going to end up happening at the end of it. Oh, so 2 of my favorite scenes, and I had to limit it down to 2 because I had a lot of really favorite scenes. But one of them was the boat scene at the beginning when she gets in the water and says she can swim, and then obviously that's not working, and he had to come back. I visually saw that so clearly in my head when I read it initially. I actually, before I could proceed on in the story, I had to go back and like read it all over again. It was probably my number 1 favorite scene in the book. And then number 2, just because of how humorous, as well as I visually really want to see it come to life, is them going into the room through their own doors. And it ends up being a magical room where the doors are separate, but they lead to the same room. And the only reason why I have this as a favorite is because Legend sets this room up, especially for Scarlet. So in a way, Julian's brother held the key to the room. I can't help but laugh about that because it just makes me laugh my head off. But it also shows so many other things. I could talk about all of the designs for the building having these secret areas you can go through and tunnels and different areas that it takes you through for the island and everything like that. But I narrowed it down to those 2 scenes. Now, the last thing I wanted to share is just some unanswered questions. So I did mention earlier with regards to Dante with the sister, I don't know if that was part of the play or if that was something different, but we never really got a resolution on if that was a thing, because again, Dante does die during the game, but there's never anything clearly said about with the sister that he kept trying to find. Was that something they were using as a decoy for him to be able to work with her? Was it something different? Was it just a complete made-up lie? We don't ever have clear resolution on that. Another thing I'm curious about is, why was the fiance kept as such a secret? It didn't really seem like there was a lot to it. It didn't really seem like it added anything aside from that mysterious element. I'm figuring that it's probably because of the fact that he was really weird and creepy and very similar to her father. And I don't know. Her dad made it seem so mysterious, and there's just never really any clarification that he kept it secret for a reason, and I would have liked to have had some reasonings behind that. I'm also very confused by the fact that when they're in play, when the game is taking place, no one can actually physically get hurt, injured, or die. And yet, at the end of the story, after the game has finished, after Caraval is done, Julian still holds the scar on his face that her father put there. Now, the reason why I find this very confusing is because does that mean that the tickets that were left for her father and her fiance, were they fake tickets? Were they not actually playing the game? Because technically, everybody who is in play, it's like a moment in time frozen. Although it goes by a different time frame than the rest of the world, all of them are kind of frozen in this game, and nothing can hurt them. So I was very confused why at the end, Julian still bore that scar, that wound. And last but not least, they never actually touch on this point, but I am very curious. What did Julian see when he got left outside in the dark? They don't go into any clear definition of it, but because they do mention that he has this very like haunted look on his face, it does leave me wondering the possibility of like The Village with M. Night Shyamalan. It gives that very like terrifying, like what's going on. And then it ends up being very disappointing. And I just don't know. I don't feel it would be something disappointing, but they never actually touch on what that terrifying thing is or what horrible thing happened. But you can tell from his face that something happened outside that you wouldn't want happening. So, yeah. I don't know if any of these questions will be answered in the next one. I haven't read it yet. We will see when I get to it. But if you guys want to share some of your thoughts down below in the comments, I would love to continue the discussion there with you. Until next time, stay safe, stay well, and I'll see you then. Bye!